Rebecca Norris, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for inviting me on.
No problem at all. No problem at all. I've been so excited all week about doing this podcast, and I'm going to tell the viewers and the listeners a little bit about the story about how we met in a while. But if you can, I'd like you to just introduce yourself. Who are you? Where do you come from?
So I'm Rebecca, and I am a potter / education advisor from the north of England, and you might know me from the Great Pottery Throwdown. I was a contestant this year, 2023. Had the best time of my life, and I think that's maybe why I'm here.
Not at all. Although I was starstruck. So let's just jump onto the meeting. So I was sat in King's Cross. I'd just done a couple of meetings in London, and I'm sitting there having my noodles, and I look across and there's a face I know walking into the noodle bar that I'm sat at. And where do I know that face? And of course, it was yourself, and you were on the way home as well, I think. And we just had a really good chat. And I was on, I know this will embarrass you, but I was on cloud nine all the way home from that. And I've been thinking about that a little bit. And why was that? Because when we chatted and when we just had a good blether in the noodle bar, it was just really, I don't know, it was an honest, authentic, just a decent conversation between two folk who shared a lot, I think, of experience and thoughts, and were pretty aligned. And then the fact that the weird bit for me was that you were on the TV screens in my living room for, I don't know how many episodes there were, but it was at least 6 or 7, wasn't it? 7 or 8?
5. No, only 5.
Is it really only 5?
No, including the final. 6.
Okay. We don't talk about the final. So yeah, it was such a great experience, and I chanced my arm and said, Rebecca, would you do? I'm doing this mental health launch. There's a mobile app, but we don't want to be just technology led. We want to just talk to real everyday folk about life, right? And it doesn't have to be dramatic. There doesn't have to be anything hugely exciting about it. We all go through life and its ups and downs, and we're trying to live or promote that kind of lived experience from people, because I think when folk hear that from other people instead of from folk in white coats who are telling them what they should and shouldn't do, I think it resonates a lot more. And sometimes you can be in situations where you feel like you're alone, or you're going through something for the first time, and when you hear somebody else talking about a similar experience, it can really give you a lift, or it can give you a direction or something to hang on to. So I think that was the story of the introduction, and I'm just really super grateful that you took half an hour to chat before I had to run and get the train. But yeah, thanks for that. So let's go straight into the Great Pottery Throwdown then, right? Which is not the only reason you're here, because we had a good blether. But let's get straight into it. So you're a potter, and I love that question as well. Who are you? I mean, doesn't that change like every 2 minutes of every day? Yeah. Like sometimes you have to be a mum, sometimes you have to be a friend. I mean, sometimes So talk to me about, or talk to us about, you were doing your everyday stuff, you were doing your pottery, and then all of a sudden, what happened?
Yeah, it was one of those where people ask you all the time about, well, why did you apply? Oh, I couldn't do things like that. I couldn't apply for a TV show. And I think for me, it's just one of those things. I thought, I'd watched it for years and thought, do you know what? I'm just going to apply, even if I just apply and see where it gets me. I didn't think ever that I would get on. So the application was really cathartic. It was a really good way of assessing where you were in your artistic kind of journey, because we're all on a journey. I know that word is bandied around like no tomorrow, but it really is a journey in your own self-esteem and growing as a person. So for me, being a huge part of my life, due to illness and whatever else had happened, I decided that, do you know what, I'm just going to go for it. So applied for it, got through the series of rounds of interviews, and the audition, and then they rang me and said you're on, and I couldn't actually believe it. I actually said to the bloke on the phone, you're actually having a laugh, like you are, is this some kind of sick joke, like why are you ringing me telling me I've got on when I haven't? And I didn't believe him for days, actually. And it was I think that was another kind of point where you think, wow, is my self-esteem that low that I don't actually believe that I was picked, that a group of people picked me. So yeah, there was a lot of growing to do even before I went on the show. And I think I came at this experience with a lot of different, I suppose, hang-ups than other people on the show.
It's a serious point and you know, you saying that you couldn't believe it, like why would they you know, choose me to go on, you know, all of that sort of stuff. But if you take it away from the Great Pottery Throwdown, it's like because I'm very similar to you in that regard, right? It's almost like everything's gonna, you know, nothing should or would go well for me, right? Why would it, right? And so carrying that around with us in everyday life, do you think that, like with reflection, do you think that hampers people that think like that? You know, I definitely do. And you've alluded to the fact that you did before you got that. But when something good happens, do you think it then kind of opens up the doors to, hold on, like what was I thinking back there? I mean, clearly good things do happen and it opens up a new horizon, or has it changed you that way or not?
Yeah, it has. But I think if you are that way inclined, it is very difficult to get out of that trap. And I think you always have it in the back of your mind, even if things do go well. And I think your brain plays lots of tricks on you and kind of tells you that, oh, it's just because it's your personality, or it's just because of this, it's just because of that.
Yeah.
And it's a very odd concept, isn't it? You know, believing in yourself. We're not brought up really to do that at all, especially in the North. and I think it was a huge point that I realised when I went on the show, because the people were all amazing, absolutely amazing. I love them to bits, but we were all from very different backgrounds, and being from the Northwest, I think really had an impact on me growing up, and that working class culture, and that just ability to, you get up, you go to work, you come home, you do it all again tomorrow. It has had a huge impact on my thought process completely. And it's hard to think, believing yourself artistically or creatively or in any other form other than you go to work, you earn a wage, you come home, you provide for your family. And that's, I suppose, entrenched in your heritage almost, that you aren't worthy of much else.
Do you think so? And so do you think that's more about nurture then? So if you, do you believe that if you were growing up in a different part of the country or a different part of the world, surrounded by different people and different environments, you don't think you'd feel the same way about that stuff?
I can only speak on my own
experience,
really, but I think, I see it in other people. I see other people that have been brought up in creative environments, or, you know, areas where there's not so much deprivation, and they have, like, I'm not saying I came from, you know, the depths of despair.
Down the pits.
Yeah. Literally from brought up in a coal mine. But what I am saying is that, those opportunities weren't there. And especially in schooling, like at school, we'd never experienced pottery. You know, we never experienced anything like that. So I think it is different experiences. If you go to a private school, then you're going to experience all those things.
Yeah.
And that's not better or worse than anybody else. It's just different.
Spot on.
So I think, I think it does play a huge part. I think more than we actually realise, and that was a huge thing that I realised on the Throwdown, that your background has a lot to do with your confidence levels and how you approach life and opportunity.
And that's kind of, if I flipped it a second though, and I thought, because I'm thinking about my own experiences and what you're saying as well, and I think, whilst I would very much agree with you, so my parents were from, one was from Belfast in Northern Ireland, and one was from Liverpool, and so there was that experience and historical context to my upbringing for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But and whilst I kind of sometimes it sounds terrible, but I lament that background because I feel like I could have, done different things, and I think that's wasted energy now on reflection. But it's
Yes.
certainly a period of time I went through where I was kind of like, I wish, which is just stupid now in reflection. But one thing I do think it gave me, and I wonder whether you think the same, is that there's almost a robustness and a resilience that you get from that others maybe don't have. So there is a kind of a plus side. It's certainly from my experience. I don't know whether you feel like you're more resilient to the ups and downs of life than other people from different backgrounds might be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it does give you a kind of grit that things can only get better. Gosh, I'm making it sound like the worst.
I didn't, I'm looking under the desk for the violin and everything. Goodness me. Okay.
Not in that way, but I think it does give you a bit of grit, and I think it's just acknowledging the fact that you come from a different background, and it's going to be a little bit more difficult to accept when you are given opportunities, and difficult to accept that changing world that you might be in, whereas other people may have a little bit more confidence, or a little bit more they're a little bit more fortunate with the opportunities that they're given, or used to it, really.
Yeah.
It's just a bit different. But yeah, I think I wouldn't be anything else. I wouldn't change my upbringing for anyone. And that's what makes me who I am. So I'm fiercely proud of where I come from. But yeah, it does. You've just got to accept that that's a part of you that will always be there.
Love it. So in terms of change then, do you think that the only way for true change to happen is to kind of stretch yourself, or to experience different things, different people? And I'm talking about fundamental change, right? So getting different inputs from all of the different scenarios. Do you think that's a catalyst for change, or do you think that you can drive it yourself in terms of the way you feel, based on just saying, almost having a word with yourself, right? Saying, enough now, I'm done with that, and I need to look at things differently. Do you think there's a combination, or do you think that actually change happens through getting out there, meeting different people, different folks, different strokes, all of that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I think I have experienced a lot in my adult life, but there is that part of me that is within me. I know there's something within me that pushes me and challenges myself all the time. But I think definitely it doesn't do you any harm to experience new things and be around different people. And, I just look at Lois, who won the Pottery Throwdown, and she's my complete inspiration. I look at her and I think, I want to be like her. Even as a grown woman, I still feel that, because she stretches herself every day. She's much further on her journey, her artistic and creative journey, than I am. And I just, and that inspires me. So I think having those inspirational people, even in your adult life, is just, it's needed. I believe it is. It's needed to give yourself that, kick up the bum and say, come on, if you want to be like that, you're going to have to work hard.
Definitely. Yeah.
I think you can never stop that growth almost inside you, but you need yourself to be on board with that. And I think I have, obviously talking about mental health, I have seen counsellors throughout my life, because I just think I have to, knowledge is key for me. So knowing how my brain is working is so key, to just being aware of what your thoughts every day, what are you thinking, why are you thinking this, and how are you going to change it.
And shameless plug, right, for the app that's just launched, by the way. We launched on 13th of May, but what you said there really resonated, because I get challenged all the time on it. Like, why are you doing that? And what does it do? And really, is it going to change anything? And the answer that I always give is, listen, it's down to you to decide whether it's a useful tool or not. There are so many tools out there. It's not a one size fits all. And actually, the real, when you boil it down, the real reason to put this into the hands of people is just to stay connected with themselves, right? And the reason for that is because I just think all of us are living in this super noisy world where you just get distracted. You're on autopilot. We had a great guest on last week, Dr. Ashley Smith, that talked about the brain kind of just has these programs in that it's learned over the years to save itself energy and time and effort. So you don't have to consciously engage in a lot of stuff, like get up, have breakfast, do coffee, go to work. It's all just pre-programmed. You're not consciously engaged in it. And I think what we're hoping to do is to have people just take a moment and capture their feelings and thoughts in that moment, right? It might be a 30-second moment, a 2-minute moment, but they're constantly, by doing that, you're kind of forcing the brain to switch on and say, well, how do I feel actually? And why is that? And where am I? And who am I with? And the data in any one moment isn't particularly useful, although it's useful in terms of capturing you and making you think. But the data is really interesting. I think for the user when it's aggregated. So when you capture like 100 moments or 1,000 moments, you start to see patterns emerging in terms of your feelings and the contextual information around that. So staying connected with yourself, however you do it, forget the app. Use meditation, use going for a walk, use listening to music, whatever works for the individual. And we're all different, thank goodness. But whatever works for the individual, use whatever works for you, and just stay connected with yourself. That's the point. Yeah. I've got a really good tip for you, by the way. If you want to meet anyone off the TV, just go to King's Cross and and sit there.
I don't know if they'd all be as nice as me to talk.
Okay, so in terms of the kind of the stuff, the ecosystem around being on the TV, what has that meant for you? Like, do you get like accosted by strangers like me? Has it been less than you thought, more than you thought? Have you coped with it well? Have you found it an intrusion? I mean, just tell us a bit about, because it must feel nice that I think it's such a lovely show. It's really cathartic. It's amazing to see what you all did with your creative talents. I mean, it's just mesmerizing, but it's relaxing at the same time. It's really hard to describe. And you're right, the chemistry. So I just loved everything about it, So, but that fame bubble, like, how's it been for you? Is it what you expected it to be? Is it different?
Yeah, I think it's just a kind of a tiny little peephole into what celebrities must feel like. And I mean, a tiny one. But yeah, you do go some places. And I went to see Jade Adams the other night in York, the comedian. And I was sat there and this lady kept looking at me and I thought, oh gosh. You just want a night where you just sat there. I've gone on my own, because I go to a lot of things on my own.
Lovely.
For the reason we talked about, you were speaking about that, just that moment of kind of just being and accepting where you are, what you're doing and how you're feeling. And then she said, oh, it always starts with, do I know you from somewhere? And then you have to then sound like a complete idiot and say, well, you might know me off the TV, which is just horrendous. Nobody ever wants to say those words. But so yeah, I kind of played the game a little bit where I was like, oh no, and she's like, oh, is it York Hospital that I know you from? And I'm like, no. And it carried on for a while. And then I said, oh, you might have seen me on the Throwdown. And she, oh, that's it. And then she told me her life story. And then it was one of them where you just think, wow, this is what celebrities must feel like all the time. And no wonder when somebody says, oh, I met that person and they were awful, they were probably just sick of talking to people. And you were probably the 8th person that had wanted to speak to them at length in that one day. So I totally get it, but also it's really nice. And as you can tell, I love talking to anyone at any point. I just love talking. So for me, it's a real blessing that people want to talk to you about your experiences and actually learn more about the show and learn more about pottery and create your creative journeys. And I think that for me is really special, and I can try and intoxicate them with the brilliance of being artistic and creative for your mental health, as well as just just an activity that to enjoy.
It's really important that, and we've got an ambassador up here in Scotland, just a fascinating background, working class, but all sorts of challenges in life, the kind of generational trauma, addiction, those sorts of things. But the one thing he talks about, and it was almost unsaid in the environment that he grew up in, was that creativity. That creativity for him. So he's a poet and a writer. He's a published author now, best-selling author. But that creativity that he had to kind of suppress when he was growing up was out for him. It was who he was, and that passion is absolutely vital. And I just you came to life when we met, around the passion that you had. I think that came through on the show. That is crucial, and I think one of life's challenges is finding a way forward, but with something that you truly, and I don't mean just like to do, right, but are really passionate about. I think that's clear from your side, that's something you I don't know whether you really enjoy it, whether you get something from it, whether it's cathartic or whether it's all of those things, and you just like to create things from raw materials. But when did that start for you? Was it early on, or did you come to a moment where you kind of tripped over it and just thought, wow?
Yeah, I can't say that I had an out of body experience,
okay.
but it was about 5 years ago,
Wow.
where like you said about your previous guest,
Yep.
it was suppressed in childhood because you just didn't do stuff like that. And then when I was we moved to Australia, and then I had major health problems. So I don't want to bore you with them, but endometriosis. I had a pituitary cyst on my pituitary gland, which needed surgery, and then I had a cancer scare. So all these three things happened kind of at once, and I just needed. It just gave me a bit of perspective, and I thought I need something else here. I was a teacher at the time, working all hours, just thinking I need something else. So I decided that for that year I was going to try every craft that I wanted to do, and see which one took my fancy to carry it on. So I went, and I had in my brain, I was like, I'm going to make a head out of clay. And I don't know why I wanted to make it. It just came into my head. And I went to like a kind of a drop-in centre for clay people, and I just made this head. And it was like, wow, I can actually do this. This is weird that I've never touched it really before, and I can do it. So that was a bit of a confidence boost. And then I just carried it on, and I did stained glass and I did painting, and those two things I've also carried on with. But it gave me an extra dimension to my life, and that sounds really, fuddy-duddy, but it is actually true. It gives me that extra dimension and that passion that I have for it, because I know how much of a difference it's made to my life and the direction of my life now, that I couldn't live without clay. And that sounds really silly, but actually it's true, because when I don't play with it, when I don't play with clay, when I'm not being creative, there's something missing from my life.
Did you stumble over it, or you talked about, trying all these things? You must have known that you were a creative at heart, and it was just what medium you were going to flourish in, I guess, was the question for you. It wasn't about, am I creative or am I not? It's about, what is it that suits me best? Would that be fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been a teacher, I think, has enabled me to use my creativity in a subconscious way through working in early years and having making displays and role play areas and being creative in my planning, and so that kind of hit those spots, I think, for a long time. But it's like we talked about before, the patterns. You have to see the patterns in your behavior and your activities to notice what it is that you actually need. I think that's what I'd done really is think, well, when am I at my happiest? When am I content with life? Well, actually, it's when you're messing around with something, hours pass by and it's just so good. I just feel so good after I've done it, which some people get from exercise. I don't at all.
Does that mean you're not running the marathon with me then this Sunday?
I am not running any marathon. The only place I run in is the local city. That's what I can tell you. So yeah, for me, it was just something, and I think when you speak to a lot of creatives, they probably feel the same way.
Yeah.
Music is something else that when I don't listen to music for a while, I get that kind of, why do I feel a bit down? Why am I feeling a bit rubbish?
Yeah.
And then I put music on, and I'm like, oh yeah, I feel great again.
It lifts you up, doesn't it? It really does. A good bit of music,
yeah, without those patterns that you're seeing in your life, you can just get into this really bad habit of just being kind of blasé all the time and just not really realizing how to change things.
Yep.
So yeah, it's been a long journey really on like you say, through subconsciously doing creative things and then actually actively consciously doing something creative and seeing and clay for me gives me so much variety, because when I hand build with clay, memories come back to me, and I'm going to sound odd, and every time I tell people, they're like, they look at me as if I said, I didn't think you were one of those people. I'm not. But when I hand build with clay, and I'll sit there and I will think about memories that I've not thought about since I was 7, 6, 5, 20. They all come. They all come back to me in a really weird way. It's like it taps into a part of your brain that you don't normally tap into.
I don't think that's weird at all. I think that when you're just in your element, it almost like opens all the doors up, right? And they can all just kind of come and go. They're very transient, but I absolutely don't think that's weird. I think I get that absolutely with running.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think it is, but also there is another side to being creative, which is the responsibility that you feel, to make something good, to sell something, to do all these things that the social media has created, and especially when you go on a show like the Throwdown, people say, "Oh, why are you not selling your work? Why are you not doing this?" And why? And that I find hard, because that for me is putting myself out there in a very vulnerable space.
Yeah.
And I'm not quite there yet. And I might be at some point, but I have to just remind myself constantly about those patterns again, that doesn't make you feel good when you put yourself in that vulnerable position. So don't do it yet.
No, and you should be doing anything like that, anything in your life, I think, if you can. And I know it's not always this simple, but I think do it because you want to do it, right? Not because somebody else says it's a good thing or things will be better if you do it. That's their experience and that's valid for them. But I think, you already, to me at least, as kind of, removed from you to some degree, it's like, you're already at an advantage, I think, because you've been through a process of self-learning already, and nobody will ever know and truly understand themselves, I don't think, and maybe there's a situation where that happens, but you're very conscious about what works for you and what doesn't, and just knowing that is a huge advantage that a lot of folk don't even think about, and they're always looking for that, filling in the gap. What's the hole? What am I missing? Like, I don't feel like there's any purpose. And, we all have that to an extent. Let's not pretend. But, at least we know, I think, between us, the things that help us navigate those feelings. And I do genuinely think that we're in the minority there. So it's a good thing. So I would say, to that and doing your own thing, doing your own, business, selling stuff, just do it because you love to do it or you want to do it, because then you'll shine in that situation, right?
Yeah, and it's hard because you have to work out whether it is fear stopping you or whether it's because you don't want to do it. And I think that is really hard. I think for anyone doing anything different in their life, is whether this is fear or do you actually not want to do it. Yeah. And I think those two things are so close together that you sometimes can't tell them apart. But it is like, I don't want anyone to think that it's an easy journey, because self-reflection and it's a lifelong journey, isn't it? It really is, just kind of knowing yourself you probably don't truly ever know yourself, because you're forever evolving and changing, and you're not the same person as you were 5 years ago.
Rebecca,
10 years
you've got
ago.
to come and sit this side of the desk. I think you've absolutely nailed it, because you're never a one person. If you think about like any moment in time, a day, a week, a year, it doesn't matter what it is, 5 years, right? It's still a snapshot of the experiences in and around that time, right? And then as soon as you move forward by a second, a minute, an hour, a day, a week, a month, a year, things are completely different. You change and you learn, and you said it 100%. You evolve and you change. So it's definitely not a destination. I know that's cliche as well, but you should have it as an everyday kind of, almost a behavior, right? A learned behavior that enables you to say, just keep checking in with yourself, because things will change. That's a guarantee, right? Things will change. Some of it will be in your control, some of it won't be in your control, but things will definitely change. So you've absolutely nailed it. Love it. Okay, so can we touch on the education? Because you've been in education for a long time, and I love the fact that you talked about that creativity coming out as part of that journey for you. Do you think, and I know the answer already because we've answered it by accident, but do you think things have changed dramatically in that world? And is the trajectory, is it kind of looking better, or in your own opinion, is it going through a bit of a challenging time? I mean, just give us a flavour of your experience in that world from what you've seen.
Yeah, I think when I started in education, we had the creative curriculum come in. It was a really exciting time actually to be in teaching. Things have been getting gradually harder, I think, for teachers generally, with different demands. But I do see a big difference in the UK education system, definitely, because obviously I've taught in the UK and Australia, and I see the difference in the two. And it's not something that I could do now. I don't think I could go back into the classroom and teach full time, because it's so demanding, it's so distrusting, it's not a pleasurable experience, I don't think, to be a teacher in 2023. And I've got lots of friends that would, given the option, if they could get the same money, the same holiday somewhere else, then they would. And that's not because they don't love the children. That's not because they don't believe in education and have a passion for it. It's because the demands on their own mental health it far surpasses what they're able to give. And that's sad. It makes me really upset and really angry, because I don't think we're losing good teachers. We're losing excellent teachers to what? To admin, to demands. It just doesn't make sense to me, and it's not something that I align with anymore. And that's why I moved out of the classroom and into my role now as an education advisor. And I do feel sad. I miss the children. I do miss the children to a certain extent.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, come on, we've all got it.
We'll come on to that.
We all know when 3 o'clock comes, so quite happy to give them back. But it is. I do miss having that creativity with them, and but I get that now through my workshops with adults. I do a lot of workshops with clay, and I do. I go into schools as well. And that's nice. That's lovely to go in there and join those two passions together. It's amazing actually, and it's really exciting.
It's horrific to hear about people with we saw this in COVID, right? Society elevates certain positions and roles, and it's all just shallow nonsense. A lot of it, it's just shallow nonsense. And when it comes down to it, and this is why I mention COVID all the time, when it comes down to it, it was the fundamental roles of society that kept us moving, that kept us going, right? And, nurses were the obvious one, the health service was the obvious one, teachers, massive. But even like, logistics drivers, all of those roles that I would say that generally society had learned through behavior to look down on, right?
Yeah.
All of a sudden they were the most important roles in society.
Yeah.
And I feel sad, like you feel hungry. I feel sad that I can see us all just reverting back to where we were, right, pre-COVID, really, and I think that's a huge missed opportunity for things like climate, for things like societal resets, for sharing of wealth. Lots of things that we could have taken a natural pause on and reset ourselves on, and we've just missed the opportunity completely on all levels. I think, right, and it's not to paint a terrible picture, because there's fantastic stuff going on out there as well, and we mustn't forget that. But what really upsets me is people with a passion that make a difference, like teachers. And you hear it in the news, right? So your story is not in any way uncommon. You see it coming from teachers, conferences, everything. The story is exactly the same. Is that we're losing the ability to do what we love to do, which fundamentally is teaching and educating children to become great, good adults and contributors to society. And there's a sadness about that, right?
Yeah, and I think for me, we really have to look back in history and think, us as adults, are we that terrible that we needed to change the education so vastly that we're where we are now? And I don't know. I mean, obviously some things needed to change. Inclusion, another one of my passions, and special needs, diversity. But I just don't think we're in a very good place, and we don't have the children's best interests at heart. I think we've got lost as a society. I mean, that's a whole other podcast. But I do think education, it needs, I think it 100% needs reform, complete reform. And I think that's the only way it's going to get better, because I don't see where this is going. I think we're going to have a major disaster on our hands in a few years when we have no teachers left that will do the job. And I think for me, I know it's my passion, but creativity should be integral to a curriculum. It should be Monday morning, not Friday afternoon, if you're good. And I think to create good humans, they need to have all resilience. They need to have critical thinking skills. They have to have creativity, because we're sending them out in the world without these skills.
I couldn't agree more. And I think, for me, how it manifested itself for me is I lived in a world where the only measure of success as a child, so you've succeeded or you failed, is exams, right? And I'm going way back now, right? When TVs were black and white. But the truth of it is, you either got your exams or you didn't, and you were a success or a failure. And everyone was driven towards aspirational further education, college, university, et cetera, and we came away en masse away from basic core skills, and included in that not just the carpentry and the plumbing and electrician and all the usual stuff, but you're absolutely right, the soft skills, right? Who's teaching, and maybe this is a part of it, maybe it does go on, but who's teaching those real life skills, those flexibility, adaptability, resilience, kindness, empathy. I'm glad. I will say, I've got two children, one 7 and one 4, and up here in Scotland they go to a particular school. And they are amazing. I'm so happy with this school that they truly live and breathe it every day, right? They live the being kind to others, respecting others' differences. I mean, it's all on the walls. They're talking about it. They're talking about their emotions. And I just, I'm grateful for that. But I wish I'd have had that. I didn't have that at all. It was very singular.
Yeah. Absolutely. There are so many positives to where we've got to, but it does seem that we've taken the fundamental part of what we need to teach our children. And I think we still have that kind of snobbery of university, and
ridiculous,
it's
isn't
just
it?
entrenched in our society that people must do that. Whereas, like you say, the jobs that need doing, your plumbers, your electricians, your bricklayers, they should be seen on the same esteem as everybody else.
100%. Yeah.
And I went to university, college and university. I've got dyslexia. I don't know how I got there. Still don't know how I got, postgrad. I don't know.
You're just showing off now. You had to get that in, didn't you?
Well, no, but yeah, I just think it's just one of those where you think you were. But if that wasn't there, I remember sitting in secondary school and them saying basically, if you're not going to go to university, what on earth are you going to do? Like, what on earth are you going to do?
Really?
Like you drop off a cliff if you don't go to university. So I think that, there is so much pressure put on. And would I have gone down that route if things had been different? I don't know. I really don't know. But I do think there needs to be a real reform in the education system, and what are the core beliefs, that what do we want from our society when those children leave to become young adults? What do we want them to be?
Yeah.
Is it the best in the world at maths or the best in the world at English skills? Or is it that we want them to be rounded human beings who are kind and caring and have all these skills to be able to be adaptable to go into any job? I don't know. And nurture their passions at a young age, because some children who are not very academic, you can tell in reception that they're never going to go to university.
Yep.
That's okay. And what we need to do is, by the time they're disengaged with education, we need to be then saying, right, well, do you want to go 3 days a week and go with Joe Bloggs down the road bricklaying? I fancy that. Right then, why force them to stay in education when they absolutely hate it? They end up in a pupil referral unit, that kicking the God knows what out of everything. When it just blows my mind. I think, has nobody got any common sense here?
That's what's missing, isn't it? Common sense. That's what's missing. I think.
Sorry, I'm going on.
Look, we're both on one now. Let's end it on a positive. So I want to talk about two last things, and the trip to Australia and living in a different place, because I've never done that. So I just wondered what that was like for you. And then we'll do a shameless plug at the end, because I think people need to buy stuff from you, and that's a given. Not because you would benefit from it financially, but just because there's heart and soul in the stuff you do, and I think that should say enough in itself. So Australia. Why did you decide to go as a family? And I guess, was the experience positive? Was it neutral? Was it negative? How and then obviously you came back. So just talk us through the Australia trip. Yeah,
so we set off with wanting to move to Italy.
There's a big difference there, Rebecca.
Yeah, quickly realised that we were rubbish at learning languages, so we had to rethink. Came home very depressed from Italy after doing our recce, and then a lady at work said, "Have you ever thought about Australia?" And I kind of pulled my face and thought, never really thought of Australia. It's a long way away. Yeah. And then that weekend, being sporadic as we are as a family, we decided that we'd book a holiday there and see what it was like. So we booked a holiday. We spent 3 weeks there, going up the East Coast, deciding if any of the places would be suitable for our family. And we decided on Brisbane in Queensland. And we thought, let's do it. We'll always, that cliche, you'll always regret not doing it. And we went, and 5 years we spent there. And I think COVID was a real big issue for us, because the border control was really tight over there. Right. And we couldn't get home. We wanted to come back for a holiday. I'd got really homesick, like to the point where I wouldn't even leave the house. My mental health had just nosedived completely. Yeah. And I didn't want to be in Australia. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to speak to anyone. I literally just wanted to sit in a dark room. So we made the decision to come back. And overall, it was a good experience, but you still have to, I think people think that it's a golden bullet, which probably I was a bit, a bit guilty of that, where you think, oh, it must be lovely to just live in the sun. And it's almost an escape route from your monotony of everyday life. And I will say that, because I am honest, and will say that I think I thought that, and it's not. You still have got to go to work. You've still got to pay bills. You've still got to deal with the monotony of life. It's just warmer, and it's just a different culture. And I think the different culture is really hard to get your head around. Some people go move there, love it, but it is a different culture. It's not England, and that can be very difficult. And just from even a small point of view, that you can't buy the things that you would buy here, or you'll tell a joke and it'll have some cultural reference to, a sitcom in 1990 or something. Nobody will get it. Like, nobody knows who Mr. Blobby is in Australia, okay? So that's 99% of my jokes gone, right? So, it is different, and I think the education system's a lot different. Yeah. So you go and you are not the bottom of but you don't know, you're not as knowledgeable as you were when you were here. Yeah. It was different, and I enjoyed some parts of it. I missed some parts of it, but I missed home more. Yeah. And being home has just been the best thing ever. It was like being born again when I got off the plane and we drove back to the house, and I'll never be able to describe that day, how it was, and have it, because I'd not come back for 5 years, and just driving and seeing greenery and hearing the birds sing and the smells and the winter's day and breathing, and you had breath that was you could see, and it was a really positive experience actually coming home.
Yeah, and there's a bit of that, and we'll wrap up now. But there's a bit of that almost is that stuff that you talk so passionately about coming home to. Isn't it interesting that stuff was there before you left? But you didn't see it. It's right in front of your face. You don't appreciate it. And then sometimes you have to go and try something for you to realize and be grateful for the things you have.
Absolutely. That's huge. And your mental health can be just, where you are in that space, in that time. Doesn't matter where you are in the world. But actually, it's your head and your mind that is in control. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Rebecca, we're going to wrap it up. I cannot tell you how grateful we are to have had you as a guest. It's been fascinating. And I think I will be heading down to King's Cross on a regular basis now as a result of our meeting. Good luck with everything, and we'll put a link in the podcast when it comes out for everyone to hit the website and buy some fantastic stuff for you. So you're an absolute star. I think you're a gem, and we didn't even get onto the Northwest stuff, which I really wanted to touch on. We'll save that for another time. But thank you so much, Rebecca. All right.
Thanks for having me, and all the best with the app and everything, because I think it's great.
Awesome. Thank you very much. All right. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.